We can get started today. Today we have Eryn. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have Eryn Correa is the founder and managing partner of Correa Legal, a law firm built by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. Prior to founding her own firm, Eryn worked as in-house securities and board governance counsel for Alcoa Corporation and in private practice for K&L Gates LLP in both their Pittsburgh and Dubai offices. Eryn serves on the board of Credit US, a nonprofit social investor, and is the chair in Sustainable Pittsburgh. So Eryn, I'll let you get started.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. I appreciate you being here, especially on a virtual call. And I'm looking forward to discussing the legal considerations for social entrepreneurs with you guys. As Allison said, my name is Eryn Correa. I am the founder and managing partner of Correa Legal. And like you, I'm an entrepreneur. So I have a background in private practice. I have a background in in-house. But in 2019, I quit my job at Alcoa because I realized I was getting further away from the kind of people I wanted to help and the populations I wanted to work with. And for a year, I worked in a coffee shop and tried to figure out where it is I wanted to put my energies. And in 2020, I started my own firm, have recently spun off into a solo firm where I get to focus on providing services to entrepreneurs and specifically social entrepreneurs. You'll see through this presentation, I'm very passionate about social enterprise and its ability to make an impact on the world. And my goal here is to give you all some practical considerations as somebody who understands what it's like to start a business, to incorporate your social values into your mission in a way that still allows you to grow and attend to the other goals that you have as an organization. Before we get started, I do have a few asks of you. To the extent that you feel comfortable, would love to see your faces if you could leave your cameras on. I also understand if you're not comfortable with that. It's always just helpful to have a little bit of feedback to understand if what I'm saying is landing or if it's not at all interesting, and I can kind of move on. And then second, I'm very curious if any of you are currently a social enterprise or considering being a social enterprise. You can do it by a show of icon or show of hands, just so I can sort of tailor more of my advice to what you guys are thinking about. Okay, not a very chatty group today. I got one. Thank you, Greg. So if at any point,
actually, if you want chattiness, what do you define as a social enterprise?
Oh, it's such a good question. I will get to that.
Well, Vicky, you asked us to raise our hands, and I'm not sure if I should.
Sure. So a social enterprise, what I'm considering and what the focus of this talk will be on is specifically for-profit, mission-driven organizations. And I can get into what exactly. Perfect. Yes. Yeah, so I'm looking very much at for-profit organizations that look to incorporate a stakeholder model of governance versus a specifically shareholder-centric model of governance. And I'll get into exactly what all of that means as well. But yes, please don't be shy. If you have any questions or if you have any comments, please speak up. I'm happy to hear about what you're doing, and I'm happy for this to be interactive. So first, here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about first, what is a social enterprise? Why you should consider being a social enterprise, the risks inherent in being a social enterprise, and how you balance your commitment to your mission against those risks. Finally, I'll address some fundraising considerations because those are always the questions I get from social enterprises and social entrepreneurs about what this means for their investment prospects. And finally, end with how it is that you can meld all of those together to find out what is best for you and how it is that you can incorporate this into your mission and business. So first, what is a social enterprise? As we were talking about with Seth, a social enterprise, the way I'm going to be talking about it, is a for-profit, mission-driven entity. And in my mind, there are two ways that these break out. The first is an organization that addresses social or environmental issues directly through its goods or services. For me, I always like to use a local example of a company called Thread International. So Thread takes plastic bottles that it recycles from Haiti, Honduras, and Taiwan, and it recycles them into fabric that are then used in consumer goods. Through the recycling of bottles from these different countries and employing people in those countries to do the recycling, Thread is directly addressing issues of joblessness, poverty, and pollution. So that's one kind of social enterprise. The other social enterprise is also, for example, a company like Patagonia. So Patagonia is not addressing a social issue specifically through its goods and services, but the way that it runs its company, it is an environmental steward. It is well known for its return policy, meaning that it has a good history of treating its customers well and has very good employee programs. Those are all ways that Patagonia has chosen to run its business that also make it a social enterprise, even though it's not directly addressing any social or environmental issues with its goods and services. And we'll be talking about both of those. Because what both of those have in common is that they have taken a step back from the traditional model of running a business and not being focused purely on the bottom line, but is focused on what's called the triple bottom line. So focused on profit, yes, but also focused on people and how they're treated and the planet and how it's treated. And all of those stakeholders have equal weight in how these companies and the people at their highest levels make decisions. Now, at this point, I usually play 2 videos about why you should be a social enterprise. I'm going to talk through those quickly. We are having some sound issues before everybody joined about them. So first, we have what is a traditional corporation. And I always like to use the example of the fashion industry. The fashion industry is often cited as the second most polluting industry behind oil and gas. And I think is a really good example of profit maximization run amok. As in, if we are allowed to take all of the wheels off of what an industry should do in terms of considering its impact on human rights, on the environment, and on employees, you get something that looks like the fashion industry. The example I play as a counterexample is actually former CEO of Alcoa, Paul O'Neill, who talks about how he incorporated very specific safety measures into Alcoa's mission, into Alcoa's culture. And having worked there, I can say that mission and those values are still very much alive and well. And what he talks about is how when he made that change to make Alcoa a very safe place to work, then not only did workplace injuries go down, but Alcoa's market share went up. And so what I like about these 2 examples is we have what is an example of what I call profit maximization run amok. And it seems like being socially minded or being a company that takes into consideration stakeholders other than your shareholders might be at odds with your financial bottom line. But what we're seeing again and again, that's actually not the case. In fact, being socially minded, it dovetails very nicely and actually can help you achieve your financial goals over a longer period of time. And so here's the financial argument for being a social enterprise. This continues to be studied from the financial perspective as to what it looks like to actually be a social enterprise and be considered a company that looks to maximize their value to society as a whole and not just to their shareholders. So first we're talking about is firms of endearment. It's a book that was written that came out in 2015. Firms of endearment, again, are companies that maximize their value to society as a whole. And you can see over 15 years, they had a significant return over the S&P 500. Or another book that I really love to recommend is a book called Connect by John Brown, former CEO of BP, who said that he commissioned a study with McKinsey, and it was found that companies that engage radically in society, so take into account their impact on the stakeholders that they do have an impact on, survive longer and have a stronger bottom line. So 2% per annum superior stock market performance. And this continues to play out year after year. The more data that we get, the more that we see that a company that is looking to maximize their value to society as a whole actually performs better financially. And that's all well and good, I would say, for big companies like Alcoa and like BP, companies that are valued at $28 billion and above. But I also want to talk about what this looks like for you starting out at these earlier stages and how it is you can mindfully incorporate these concepts into your business while you also have different competing interests coming at you. And the way that I look at things as a lawyer is, how can we mitigate the risks that you have that are coming at you against the social mission that you would like to incorporate? And so here are the risks that I have identified, especially working with social enterprise and from the legal perspective. So first, social enterprise and specifically benefit corporations, which I'll talk about what kind of entity that is, just haven't been around that long. So benefit corporation legislation, which incorporates a stakeholder model of governance, I think was only adopted in Pennsylvania in 2013, maybe Delaware in 2015. It's not been around enough and long enough for these companies to start to get sued and for us to really understand what the risks are. So the risk here is that we don't know how badly things can go wrong yet. And so that's something to take in mind. Second is, in asking your directors and officers within your corporation to consider additional stakeholders, you're potentially expanding the liability for those directors and officers, right? You have more responsibility to more people, meaning you might have more liability to more people. Now, the legislation is written in such a way that it mitigates against that, but it's something to take in mind and into account. Finally, or additionally, additional business or reputational risk, right? There are so many different ways, I'm sure you all are familiar with the way things can go wrong sort of in early stage companies. And if you come out in the beginning to say that you are socially minded and or socially conscious or environmentally conscious, and those things don't bear out to be true, you might be taking on additional reputational or business risk because you would be met with greater criticism than you would if you had not made those promises sort of early on. Investment opportunities can be a risk. What you're saying when you are a social enterprise is that you are not solely concerned with the bottom line of your business, meaning that you're not solely concerned with the bottom line of your investors. And so not all investors are going to be interested in that. And finally, the financial cost to your business. Again, because a social enterprise as a business entity is a newer entity, you have to start looking then for people who understand how to incorporate that into your business. And that just costs money. If you're looking for specialty lawyers, you're looking for specialty accountants, or also specialty employees that can help you incorporate these concepts into what you're talking about. But you are all entrepreneurs, you know nothing comes without risk. So what you want to do is, where I come in, is how do you balance your commitment to the risk that is inherent in what you're doing? When I talk about commitment, what I'm saying is this: at a certain point, there's going to be a clash between your values and your ability to make profit. That's not just for social enterprise, I think that's for any company. And when those clashes happen, how committed will you be and how accountable do you want to hold yourself to making sure that you choose the path of your mission and not necessarily profit maximization in that moment? And there are ways that you can incorporate those safeguards into your business, even at early stages, so that those decisions are harder or easier to make as they come along. And so here are the ways that I have found to balance your commitment to your mission and the risk. First is incorporate as a benefit corporation, which we'll talk about what that is. Second, you can look at your governance documents. So when I say governance documents, I'm talking about your operating agreement, bylaws, your articles of incorporation. Incorporate certain concepts into those documents without necessarily incorporating under the state statute. Third, you can take a look at your corporate policies, which are a great way of starting to incorporate a certain amount of your mission and culture into your environment, into your business. And it's a lower risk way of adhering to your mission, while at the same time making sure that it is baked into what you're doing. And finally, you would look at BCorp certification. BCorp certification I'll get into is a little bit of a tricky one for me to place, but what it is it's a third-party nonprofit certification, like LEED certification, like Fair Trade Organic. It's a stamp from a third party that says, I've taken this assessment, I've hit these number of points, and therefore I can be certified as a company that is stakeholder focused. So first, I will talk about benefit corporations. Benefit corporations are a legal entity. So it's much like a limited liability company or a C Corp. It is its own statute that when you incorporate in Pennsylvania or Delaware or any of the other 38 states that recognize it, you check the box that this is who you want to be. What this does is it makes your commitment to stakeholders legally binding, your directors and officers, when it is you are, oh, Seth, I see you have your hand raised. Oh, you think you might
Sorry,
be
I had a
muted.
couple of
Yeah, go ahead.
questions in the chat.
Yeah, please.
So if you are a C Corp, can you get B Corp certified?
You can get B Corp certified. And I'll talk about this too, but what happens is, so the Benefit Corp or B Corp certification, you take what's called a B impact assessment, and you have to hit 80 points out of 200, right? And so we go through this whole assessment and you try to get the points. If you are a benefit corporation and not a C Corp, you actually start off with 10 points, which is pretty high when you're looking at how many points. Like there are certain categories you can get 0.7 points, 0.5 points, things like that. So if you can start out with 10, it's pretty good. So you can be a C Corp and go for B Corp certification, but it might just be a little bit harder to get the points you need without actually having incorporated.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so this benefit corporation is legislation. What it does is it makes your commitment to stakeholders legally binding. Directors and officers are obligated to consider all stakeholders when making decisions. In Pennsylvania, it requires the appointment of a benefit director and a benefit officer. So what we're looking at is additional people that you would have to hire and bring on under your umbrella, because a benefit director has to be independent. They can't be your CEO. They can't be somebody you're related to. It requires filing of an annual benefit report. So in Pennsylvania, that's $70 to file your benefit report that says, did you hit your social goals? If so, how? If not, why not? And so it's an additional investment of time and resources that you're going to be making towards the annual benefit report. On the flip side, it does provide protection for directors and officers, right? So it's saying you make a commitment to all of your stakeholders. So if one of your stakeholders is the environment, that doesn't mean that if you accidentally pollute the oceans that Save the Whales is going to come and be able to sue you. The only people that can sue you are the company itself, the shareholders, or the directors. And what they sue is in an action that is for the enforcement or the trying to attain your general public benefit. So it's not like those people are getting money out of what it is that you're doing. So I actually think that the incentives for suing to enforce your mission are probably pretty low. In fact, the risk there I think is actually pretty low. But you are asking your directors and shareholders to keep you accountable to your mission. So I think it's another layer of accountability. Costs are pretty commensurate with what it would look like to incorporate in Pennsylvania or any other state. It's $125 one-time filing fee. Or if you're amending to be a benefit corporation from a C Corp, it's a $70 amendment fee, $70 for your annual benefit report, and then any fees that you would incur from your lawyers for drafting your bylaws, drafting your operating agreement, fees that you might incur in drafting your annual benefit report. So you're looking at, besides the annual benefit report and drafting sort of what would be specialty bylaws or operating agreements, the fees are pretty much on par with what you would expect from incorporating as any other entity. This is a good middle step that I like to recommend to people as they're thinking about it, is either amending or drafting your corporate documents to incorporate benefit corporation policies, but not actually incorporating as a benefit corporation. So what you can do is say, I would love my directors and officers to continue to make decisions with all stakeholders in mind, but I don't want to appoint a benefit director. I don't want to appoint a benefit officer. I actually don't want to have to file an annual report because I have 2 people on my team and it's just not worth our time and resources at the moment. And so what you do is you sort of piecemeal incorporate what it is you want. Pennsylvania is a state in particular that has very permissive laws that allows you to incorporate different kind of concepts like this into your bylaws. So you'd be able to pick and choose what it is you wanted in order to build the corporation the way that you wanted. And again, the fees are pretty much the same, $125 one-time filing fee at the state, $70 one-time amendment filing fee if you're amending, and then any fees that you would have from your lawyer for amending your corporate documents or drafting corporate documents. Again, this is something that I often recommend to people who are considering being a social enterprise, but might not be ready for the administrative burden that is inherent in being a benefit corporation under the state's laws. And so you can figure out how it is that this works for you at this level and then continue to grow from this point. Our next point for you is corporate policies. So if you don't want to incorporate as a benefit corporation, if you're not looking to amend your corporate documents, what you can do is start to incorporate policies within your business that embody the values and missions that you want. So if you're looking at diversity in hiring, anti-sexual harassment, non-discrimination, your code of conduct, a DE&I policy, mission statements, all of these things are ones that are internal policies. So unless these policies, like the sexual harassment policy or non-discrimination policy, have legal underpinnings, they don't expose you to the same kind of legal risk if you are, say, to violate one of those policies. Now, if you violate them over a significant period of time and somebody figures that out, it's not a good look. And that could lead to other issues. But from a legal standpoint, in terms of your officers and directors, you're not exposing them to any more liability by having these kind of policies. And it is a low cost way and a low risk way for you to incorporate your mission into your business and into your culture from the very beginning. And what you're looking at in terms of drafting is, if you hire a lawyer to draft those corporate policies, though a lot of them are available online, and you can kind of incorporate as you want what values it is that you find are good for your business and how you'd like to incorporate those into your culture. And then finally, B Corp certification, which I said I had a hard time placing sort of on this risk commitment scale, simply because, as I said, it is a third-party certification, requires a very intensive B impact assessment. That's about a 50-page PDF when you print it out. You must recertify every 2 years so that you make sure that you're current with whatever changes that they're making, as well as you can't sort of just rest on your laurels from your first assessment. Certification, you must receive a score of 80 out of 200. And like I said, some categories you get half a point, you get 1 point, very low things. For things that are quite a large lift, right? So they're looking at you to have environmental and social KPIs, or they're looking for you to have, taking into account whether or not you have breastfeeding rooms for women, or do you have low flushing toilets, or do you have, it takes into account a lot of different areas of your business. And it's also expensive. Not only does it require a input from your team, a cost that is your team's time and your team's money, it also starts at around $1,000 for the initial certification, and then is graded up based on your annual sales. Yes, Seth.
Sorry.
Yeah, no.
So this
I
is
love the
all
questions.
very, a lot of the costs here are legal costs, I assume, in doing this, in this certification, right?
Yes. So you can do it by yourself. The B Corp certification you can do by yourself. And actually B Corp is quite good about communicating with you as to how to go through the certification. They want people to be certified. But a lawyer can help sort of, draft certain policies or, get you
So
on track with certain categories.
the reason why I bring it up is the startup that we're doing is distributed ledger oriented. And one of the things we're looking at is coming up with contracts for ESG metrics. And then people would sort of do this on their own. Is anyone exploring that space for B Corp certification?
So can you tell me a little bit more about that?
I could, but we'll get into a very divergent thing. I don't want to waste anyone else's time, but maybe I'll send you an email later.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd love to hear more about how you're incorporating that. That's really interesting. Yeah, so, and also I'll say my bias is I know where the legal costs are. So those are the ones that I always see, right? So do my best to sort of uncover what those look like for you. But yeah, so B Corp certification, third-party certification, you can do it yourself, but it is quite labor intensive. So finally, this is how I see the balance of your risk and commitment, right? On your highest risk, highest commitment, you incorporate as a benefit corporation. Moving over closer towards the middle, you can amend your corporate documents. Lowest risk, lowest commitment is your corporate policies, and we've got B Corp certification like sort of floating in the middle, depending on how you want to look at it. And that's how I see that you can balance those. What's wonderful about these as well is that no one of them is completely binding. Each of these allow you different avenues in embodying your social mission into your business and allows you to grow. So if you start off with corporate policies, you can then have a benefit corporation structure built around those policies, right? It's not that one is to the exclusion of the other. And finally, I always like to address fundraising considerations because everybody asks me whether or not being a social enterprise is going to impact their ability to raise money. And I always give the worst lawyer answer you can give, which is it depends. And what it depends on is, when you're raising money, regardless of whether you're a social enterprise or you're a C Corp or you're an LLC or your industry is robotics or recycling or tech or whatever you're looking at, you want to have investors that are aligned with your mission and vision. I'm seeing more of a trend, and I will say, I'm not a financial expert, I'm not an investor myself. I'm seeing this from the company side, but you're seeing more of a trend towards ESG, towards impact investing, specifically because it is showing to have better returns, be more resilient and more sustainable over the long term. But that said, there are investors who are not going to be super pumped about the idea that what you're going after is stakeholder triple bottom line, not shareholder single bottom line, right? And this is then about finding the right investor who aligns with what you're doing and wants to support your mission. I think the last thing you want, what anybody wants, is to have an investor who is not aligned with that mission. And I would say that is, again, whether you're a social enterprise or not, those are going to be the same questions you're going to be asking yourself. So what does this look like for all of you? How do you take all of the risks and all of the social good you want to do in the world and apply it to your business? I mean, in a lot of ways, you all are already doing that in terms of figuring out how it is you want to go forward, the team that you want to hire, and how it is that you accomplish the goals that you set out for yourself. So I'd say the first thing to do is not only pick a lawyer that understands what you're trying to do, though it will help. I've known lawyers that try to talk people out of being a social enterprise. So it's better to have people on your team, investors, lawyers, accountants, everyone who are on board with what you're trying to accomplish. Give consideration to where you are in your development and how it is you can give yourself room to grow. Take a real look at what your budget and resources are and allow yourself some opportunity to take the goals that you have and really see how they can realistically fit into what you want to do and grow further. And I would say finally, as I said, I'm very passionate about the ability of social enterprise to make a real impact on the world. I do think if you're here and you're already thinking about this, you're going to find yourself ahead of the curve. And it's just having faith in knowing that what you're doing is going to have the impact that you want and how to do that mindfully as you continue to grow. So that is, I do need to change my email address. It's .co, not .com. But if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you have anything else, any comments, anything else, here and happy to chat with you.
Hello, Eryn. I just have a quick
Hi.
question.
Sure.
So the social corp versus CSR are still distinct, right? Like we are not, if a company is putting not just required CSR by the government laws, but they're doing way bigger than what they're required to do from social standpoint, because they truly believe in their mission and what they want to give back to the community. Maybe their core product and services may not be the ones which are directly contributing, but perhaps the revenue or the profit that they're getting from it is what they're investing or giving back to the community. Would that be counted towards it, or it still won't be?
Towards a CSR policy, or towards sort of like a benefit corporation stakeholder focused model?
Yes, benefit stakeholder focus model.
Yes. So I think it is counted as part of it, right? Because what you're doing is you're still conscious of the impact that you have on your community and taking those funds to make sure that they are supporting that community. But I will say that with benefit corporations, they try to move that line a little bit further back so that the impact that your business can have on the community is internalized rather than externalized, and you're addressing issues from that standpoint before they get to a point where you can address them, through other means, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm also going to fix that last slide so that you get my right email address. It's gonna bug me.
Thank you,
All
Erin,
right,
for doing this. This was great.
thank you.
Sure. Do we have any other questions today? Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, we can give you some time back in your day, and thank you for doing this. This is great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.